Tonight on CFTK-TV News, opposition is rising up against the Prince Rupert pipeline, the West Coast Express is back up and running once again, and the provincial government has made their choice on a rent cap for next year.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cal Maslin, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. Opposition has mounted as the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline has recently begun its construction. CFTK's Jaylene Matthews has more information on the subject.
On August 21st, over 300 people attended a pipeline impact meeting hosted by local youth organizers of the Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition. Concerns expressed were around the potential environmental impact of the Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline and the Ksila Sims terminal. The proposed pipeline is currently undergoing environmental assessment. The Prince Rupert gas transmission pipeline would start in the northeast of BC and end in the estuary of the Nass River at the proposed Ksila Sims LNG terminal. The pipeline would cross the Babine, Susquehanna, Salmon, Chigunya, Skeena, Kispiox, and Nass rivers. Critics of the project say the damage done by trenching through, hanging over, and tunneling under the rivers, creeks, and streams to build the pipeline would be too great. Nisga'a community members have announced they will be pursuing an injunction against construction. The Gatineau hereditary chiefs burned a benefits agreement they signed 10 years ago with the pipeline's previous ownership, a project that didn't go ahead and was restructured into the current proposal. The Gatineau hereditary chiefs have now set up a blockade at Cranberry Junction, where the access road for the project meets Highway 37. Local and recreational traffic are being permitted to cross, but not LNG transport vehicles, who have been forced to reroute. In an August 1st statement, the president of Bechtel Energy, the company selected to oversee the project, Paul Marsden, called the project an exciting opportunity to show how major energy infrastructure can and should be developed in partnership with Indigenous communities. Marsden said the project will be to the highest standards of safety and environmental protection and create jobs and support economic development. For CFTK-TV News, I'm Jaylene Matthews.
The BC Wildfire Service has lifted its last remaining wildfire of note designation as the number of blazes burning in the province has now dropped below 300. The Wildfire Service lifted the designation from the Corya Creek blaze close by the city of Terrace, meaning there are no longer any fires that the service deems as highly visible or potentially posing a threat to people or public safety. But a fire information officer said that this doesn't mean that the wildfire season is now over. More than 700 firefighters and 100 aircraft are still out battling the over 200 or so blazes. Announced earlier this morning, people in Hartley Bay and Digby Island are now able to access high-speed internet, which should unlock faster access to digital services. Built by City West, there were 85 households in Hartley Bay and 48 households in Digby Island installed. This also means that the Prince Rupert Airport will have access to faster-paced internet as well. This is part of the 2017 initiative put out by the BC government investing $584 million to implement connectivity throughout the province. As of January 2024, about 80% of rural homes have access to high-speed internet. The West Coast Express got back up and running after days of being cancelled. Rail workers were ordered back to work by the Canadian Industrial Relations Board, ending a multi-day lockout and widespread disruptions. CTV's Craig Krause reports.
This West Coast Express platform here in Port Coquitlam was bustling with riders Monday morning as many jumped on trains to get to work. After days of having to find alternative modes of transportation, crowds letting out a sigh of relief.
We had to drive. It was awful. It was taking us an extra hour.
It's hard because I don't have a car right now, so it was really difficult to get in, but I did work at home one day because I couldn't get in.
This all comes after more than 9,000 rail workers were forced back to work following a Canada Industrial Relations Board decision. Here's how its ruling breaks down. Employees must be back to work Monday, follow the terms of their previous collective agreement until a new one comes into effect, and that the union and the companies move forward with binding arbitration, leaving the union unsettled.
Any federally regulated worker now in who has a job in the supply chain has now lost bargaining power, has now lost the ability to negotiate higher wages, better working conditions, and to protect what they have.
The union vows to appeal CERB's decision in court. As CN Rail says, 5 offers have been on the table. But for now, the Labor Board says both sides will meet on Thursday to begin the arbitration process. And in the meantime, the West Coast Express service is back to its normal schedule this week, but TransLink is warning that due to freight backlog, as we're seeing here just to my right, there could be delays on the tracks. Craig Crowe, CTV News, Port Coquitlam.
Coming up next, a business is shutting down due to local street crimes and overall chaos. Welcome back. The province has set the maximum allowable rent hike for next year. The increase is being capped at 3%. And as CTV's Martin McMahon reports, some are calling for changes to the rent control formula.
The NDP government has pegged the allowable rent increase to inflation, and that means landlords can hike the rent 3% starting next year. That's a drop from the 3.5% increase that was allowed for this year.
Increasing it doesn't help. I mean, their expenses are write-offs to begin with, so, don't buy if you can't afford it.
I mean, it would be much better if it was 2% or 1.5%, but still, 3% is better than 3.5%.
And given how squeezed people are, tenants say any increase is going to hurt.
There is no way out. There's no other option. Even if they increase 4%, we all have to pay.
Realistically, I don't think the landlord should be profiting off of our apartments.
My parents are they are helping us pay our rent in here, but we are working and it's still very expensive in here, and with this increase it's going to be even harder.
But for those who are in the housing business, they say landlords are still playing catch up after the government froze rent during the pandemic.
We were encouraging the minister to actually look at something a little more robust. We used to have a formula that was 2% plus CPI.
If you're going to have this philosophy that under rent control, you are going to allow rent increases for increases in operating expenses for landlords, you can't then play politics with that. And when expenses go up too much, say, no, we don't care that much. It's kind of like only clamping down on one side and not the other.
Given the provincial election is less than 2 months away, we asked the other parties if they believe the rent increase formula should change. In BC United's case, if it would prefer the old 2% plus inflation model.
So it's really about trying to strike that balance. That formula of the inflation plus 2% was developed years and years ago. I would have to have a modernized look.
This addresses part of the issue that we're facing, but the other part really is that we don't have enough truly affordable housing.
Landlords will not be allowed to impose the 3% increase until the new year and must give tenants 3 months' notice. Martin McMahon, CTV News, Vancouver.
Street crime and chaos have been major concerns for businesses struggling to keep their doors open. Now a longtime BC business is shutting down, and the owner says he no longer can handle the public disorder that's scaring customers and staff. To Rob Buffum with more.
They've been building and fixing furniture for 70 years. In a few weeks, they're closing the door at this downtown Victoria store.
Certainly been the tipping point in us closing. We would have hung in for at least another year or two, I think, if it wasn't for the street crime.
Street chaos, including threats of violence to staff and customers, and plenty of petty crime, including vandalism and thefts from cars parked nearby.
If people aren't coming in, then that's the lifeblood of the business.
Its owner, David Screech, says the province hasn't done enough to address public safety issues flowing from decriminalization. He wants to see involuntary care expanded for those in need and the province push for tougher bail laws.
The status quo is clearly not working and only getting worse.
It's not the only iconic business impacted by street crime. This fabric store on Vancouver's downtown east side has been a staple for decades. Its windows boarded up during the pandemic. It announced on Facebook it's closing for now, selling the building, citing multiple reasons for that decision, but noting the vandalism, graffiti crime, and our neighborhood falling apart around us are a reason we won't relocate in downtown Vancouver, but not the reason we're closing. These issues are not limited to our neighborhood or city.
It's a growing sense of lawlessness on the streets. It's one thing, the homelessness, but when you're dealing with lawlessness and criminal element.
The head of Victoria's Downtown Business Association says Greg's Furniture is just the first of many that will close if the issues aren't addressed.
The fatigue out there among business owners and their staff is reaching a critical point.
The province issued a release noting involuntary care to help those most in need is authorized in some cases, and it's appointed an expert to examine this and other issues related to the overdose crisis.
Yet another dog owner is speaking out after their pet was attacked by an aggressive off-leash animal. The smaller dog survived but needed emergency surgery. This is at least the third attack in the last month. As CTV's Ben Milcher reports, one family is offering a $5,000 reward to identify the owner of a dog in a fatal encounter.
They just came right for us.
Within the confines of this small hallway on Wednesday, a large off-leash dog attacked Luna, an 18-month-old Pomeranian. Alicia Wilson says when she tried to break it up, the aggressive dog turned on her.
I was being attacked, so it was grabbing like all of my clothes. My clothes were completely torn all the way down the side, and I was trying to pull her, push her up as far as I could to get her away from the dog.
In the process, the dog bit her on the face. It also tore a hole in Luna's foot, requiring emergency surgery at a cost of $2,300. In late July, Goldie, a 5-year-old doodle, also had emergency surgery after a dog bit her throat in this Stanley Park off-leash area. The city says animal control is still trying to identify the owner of the other dog. We actually spoke to that owner in the days after the incident, which he characterized as a dog fight, not an attack.
And I don't think it's fair because it was not just my dog's fault.
The investigation into the owner of an off-leash dog that killed Sky near Second Beach is also ongoing. Sky's owners are now offering a $5,000 reward for information identifying this woman.
The bottom line, the common denominator in all of this is take responsibility for your dog, leash and license your dog, understand how to be socialized yourself, and also socialize your dog properly.
The city of Surrey says the attack on Wilson and her dog is under investigation. Wilson says she has seen the door to the apartment where the dog lives wide open a few times since the incident.
That's absolutely ridiculous. There's a baby that lives down the hall. There's lots of people have dogs, kids, all of that. And these people are not taking their dog safety or anybody else's safety seriously at all.
That makes 3 off-leash attacks in a month, including 1 fatality, and to this point, 0 consequences. Ben Milcher, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to tonight's weather, the North Coast shall contain partly cloudy conditions at a low at 10 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area will deal with some partly cloudy conditions as well, but see a low at 8 degrees instead, and the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District should have a few clouds and a low down at 0 degrees. On the North Coast, the upcoming week will see mostly rain, but possibly a bit of sun too, as the high bounces between 15 and 17 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them will start rainy, get pretty sunny, then turn to mixed sun and clouds as the high shifts between 18 and 24 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, their next week or so will actually be mostly sunny with a few clouds mixed in, and the high will move from 19 to 25 degrees. Checking out the highways now, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is a special travel advisory, limited visibility, bridge maintenance, water pooling, maintenance, utility work, construction work, crack sealing, paving operations, and the Usk Ferry is out of service due to the low river level. Highway 37 has some maintenance and fog patches, some road maintenance work and construction work on the Nishka Highway, and the Telegraph Creek Road has fog patches. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the View of the Province's highway cams. still to come because of recent government actions. Some changes could be coming to Canada's immigration levels. Welcome back. A former care aide who preyed on the most vulnerable seniors, stealing tens of thousands of dollars from them, has been sentenced. CTV's Michelle Bernora has more on the time she'll serve and the actions that prosecutors described as reprehensible and deplorable.
Her name is Anna Chamdel, a former care aide who pleaded guilty to 34 charges related to defrauding seniors of $60,000 and another $100,000 in attempted fraud.
Terrible. I think she was evil.
One of her 20 victims is 83-year-old Leonard. After having a stroke and falling very sick, Chamdel showed up at his door saying she was with Fraser Health and could help him get a free cleaning service. It was a lie.
She took my credit cards, but I didn't give her my password, so I don't know how she got to be able to use it.
He says Chamdel ended up stealing about $7,000 from him.
It was hard. It affected me for a while.
Chamdel had worked at a pharmacy where she obtained information on clients. Then she'd pretend to either be a care aide or healthcare worker with Fraser Health, carrying fake ID, a medical kit, and wearing scrubs. During victim impact statements, the court heard how the betrayal of seniors by someone they trusted had devastating impacts, both financially and emotionally. Carol Matthews hired Chamdel through an agency to care for her 95-year-old father.
She ended up taking his ID, his visa, and cash from him the first day she was there.
She says the thefts made him untrusting of others. He lost his independence and had to move to a care home.
He was too nervous. He was too scared because he was thinking that people were at the door, people were knocking, people were trying to get in.
Chamdel, who reoffended even after being arrested and released on an undertaking, apologized to her victims, saying she's trying to make herself a better person. Her lawyer said she committed the offenses to keep her and her now ex-husband financially afloat. The judge called her actions premeditated. Following a joint submission from Crown and Defense, the judge sentenced Chamdel to 4 years minus time served, plus ordered her to pay restitution. The sentence, not long enough, say some victims and their families. Michelle Bernoro, CTV News, Surrey.
After a historic surge in recent years, the federal government is cracking down on the temporary foreign workers program. And as CTV's Judy Trinh explains, the Prime Minister is signaling that more changes could be coming to immigration levels.
Hola, ¿cómo está? Bienvenido. During the pandemic, the Trudeau government increased the number of temporary foreign worker permits. Many businesses, from hotels to restaurants to offices, used the program to deal with staffing shortages in low-wage jobs. But the number of permits are being cut.
We will have, with today's changes, about 65,000 fewer people participating in the temporary foreign worker program.
The farming, construction, and healthcare sectors are exempt, but starting in 1 month, temporary worker permits will be denied in regions where the unemployment rate is higher than 6%. Foreign workers can only make up 10% of the workforce, down from 20%, and only 1-year permits will be granted instead of 2. The hotel industry worries it will be more challenging to find and retain workers.
We have found resort properties, for example, or areas in remote parts of Canada have more trouble attracting workers and domestic workers, so they rely on this program to operate, particularly through the summer months.
The post-COVID surge in foreign residents, including workers and international students, has more than doubled to nearly 2.8 million people since 2021. That explosive growth has put pressure on social programs and contributed to the housing crisis.
It is just more of the same from this Prime Minister. And today we hear a reversal of their own policy.
Right now, Canada approves 500,000 permanent residents each year. Today, the Prime Minister signaled that number could also be lowered.
We're looking at the various streams to make sure that as we move forward, Canada remains a place that is positive in its support for immigration, but also responsible in the way we integrate and make sure there's pathways to success for everyone who comes to Canada.
The Trudeau government says these reductions in temporary foreign worker permits will benefit youth and newcomers looking for work, and more immigration measures are expected in the fall. Judy Trinh, CTV News, Ottawa.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is up 11/10 of a cent, the price of gold is down $2.30, oil is down $1.89, natural gas is down 4 cents, aluminum is the same as yesterday. In Toronto, the TSX is down 89.01 points, the Venture Index is down 4.49. In New York, the Dow Jones is up 9.98 and Nasdaq is up 29.05. Still ahead, the federal government has also made a proposal related to electric vehicles. Welcome back. The federal government's proposed a 100% tariff on electric vehicles from China and a 25% tariff on Chinese steel. CTV's Mike LeCouture has more on how it could impact consumers.
The federal government says this move is all about protecting jobs in the Canadian auto industry.
China has an intentional, state-directed policy of overcapacity and oversupply.
Christian Freeland says China is trying to flood the market with goods made with poor labor and environmental standards. So Canada is responding with massive tariffs on Chinese steel, aluminum, and electric vehicles.
Listen, we're acting to protect our workers, to protect our industry, to protect, obviously, the generational investments that we have seen coming in our country.
Mirroring a move by the United States, Canada is imposing 100% tariffs on imports of Chinese electric vehicles and a 25% surtax on certain steel and aluminum products from that country. However, there are no Chinese car brands currently offering these vehicles in Canada.
This is a preemptive measure to make sure that we're aligned with the U.S.
The Canadian Vehicles Manufacturers Association welcomes the move, but says this could make it harder for the government to hit its own environmental target of ensuring all new car sales are zero-emission vehicles by 2035.
We should give Canadians the time to have confidence to make the switch, and we will see mass adoption, but a federal sales mandate never was the right approach, and it will continue to be a problem towards 2035.
Despite imposing tariffs on those cheaper Chinese-made EVs, the federal government remains confident that goal is achievable. The more immediate concern is China starting an all-out trade war targeting Canadian exports.
I think they'll go everywhere we've seen them go before. I think you can see beef, pork, grains, that kind of thing on the East Coast, lobster.
China could also respond by cutting off the sale of critical minerals that Canada needs for our EV supply chain. And that could make things more expensive for Canadians. Mike LeCouture, CTV News, Ottawa.
The BC Real Estate Association says it's expecting to see home sales and prices rebound later this year after the Bank of Canada dropped interest rates. The association's latest report expects home sales to increase by 4.4% to 76,300 units this year. The association's chief economist, Brendan Ogmundson, says momentum from the Bank of Canada's policy shift could carry over to next year. The association says it expects average home prices in BC this year to increase 2% before a 2.9% increase next year. That would push average prices over the $1 million threshold. That's all our news for now. From everyone at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin. Thanks for watching.